but please tell your friends about it during the next break. Somewhere in the room, there is a wish tree. Does someone know where the wish tree is? Perfect. The wish tree is outside. People have already found it. The wish tree is a community tradition that occurs in different forms around the world. And we would love for people to write down a wish, a hope, a prayer, a thought, a bit of queer joy for the LGBTIQ people around the world. And so you can write down something on, I think there are ribbons. Are there ribbons at the wish tree? I believe there are ribbons where you can write down your thought, your hope, your wish. We're going to turn this into a beautiful piece of art that is co-created by all of us, and that will live on in the Outright office. So please feel free to find that tree during the next break and to write your message on it. And also on the screen, there is a QR code for a playlist. This is a Queer Joy playlist, and we want everybody here to contribute to it. So you can capture that QR code and add your songs, your Queer Joy songs. They could be songs by your favorite queer artists or just songs that contribute to your joy. And we will share the final playlist with everybody here, with the attendees. So with no further ado, I know that people are still moving in, but I am going to invite up to the stage our keynote speaker, Vitaly Zakhurchuk. Vitaly is the head of the Outright International branch in Ukraine and the coordinator of the LGBTIQ+ technical working group within the UN Protection Cluster, which is a historic development that Vitaly is going to tell you about. He has over a decade of experience in humanitarian coordination and protection programming, and he is continuing to advance inclusive coordination mechanisms that ensure that queer people and other marginalized groups are not left out of humanitarian response and humanitarian decision-making in Ukraine. We are so thrilled to have Vitaly here with us from Ukraine. Many of you might know that it has been very hard for men in particular to get out of Ukraine. And Vitaly has been working for us in Ukraine for a couple of years, and we're so happy that he's here with us today. So Vitaly, please come up to the stage. Everyone, please give Vitaly a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. I need some seconds. Hi everyone, and thanks for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here. And I'll start. My name is Vitaly Zakharchuk, and yes, I lead Outright International branch in Ukraine. And I know discrimination firsthand. I've been attacked in the street, just who I am, mocked and bullied at all of my works till I had to quit because of my Sojiesc. That is why my hair is short now, and I'm trying to dress and look in the way that feels safe on our street in Ukraine. As a personal vulnerability, I'm gay, based in Ukraine, and I'm internally displaced person twice. And also I'm a representative of ethnic community in Ukraine, Bulgarian community in Ukraine. Before I start, I want to ask you for one thing. Let's take 20 seconds of silence. I understand it is quite hard in New York, but let's take, and during this time think about all those whose voices were silenced, not only by enemies' bombs, rockets, shaheds, but by fear, by indifference, and by institutional silence. Thank you. Discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it is quiet. It hides behind polite silence, behind unanswered messages or invitations that never receive a reply. In humanitarian systems, that silence can cost lives. It costs lives when gay families are denied evacuations because they're not real family for Ukrainian law system. when only one mother in lesbian couples illegally recognized as a parent and the other cannot protect their child, when trans people are forced to buy unsafe medication because official treatment is not out of reach, or they are turned away from aid programs because their documents don't match their identity. There are rare cases. They are patterns. They show what happens when people in power choose to stay quiet because it feels safer. When someone says, these teams are too sensitive for us. Yeah, the LGBTIQ topics often the elephant in the room. 3 years ago, LGBTIQ inclusion wasn't part of humanitarian system in Ukraine. Today it is. We built bridges between all of LGBTIQ-led NGOs in Ukraine, LGBTIQ initiatives and leaders, and humanitarian actors, UN agencies, international organizations, and now all of our challenges, all of our needs, data, and our expertise are reflected in all of national humanitarian plans. Since 2022, we have supported more than 40 community-based organizations, not only in Ukraine, but in other nearby countries who help LGBTIQ communities with all of their urgent humanitarian aid, with evacuation process, food, medicine and other things. We organized two national forums of LGBTIQ inclusion and humanitarian response, and we use it to reflect, to plan, and to move forward together. Also, together with all of UN team in Ukraine, we helped share both the humanitarian plans for this year and for the next year. Our team provides trainings, technical advice, and daily support for local NGOs that deliver aid on the ground. And through this work, we have proven one simple truth: inclusion saves lives. In frontline areas, our partners provide not only food or shelter, but also psychosocial support, accessing to HIV treatment and life-saving hormone therapy services that once didn't exist for our community. And on this moment, I want to say huge thank you to all of our donors in Ukraine and all of our supporters. Center for Disaster Philanthropy, Government of Ireland, CNN Impact Your World, Global Impact, Balenciaga, Johnson & Johnson, Give Out, and others. And also I want to thank all of our allies in Ukraine, all of local NGOs, activists who always staying with us, fighting with us, and trying to build my lovely country in Ukraine and rebuild this country after the war. Since August 2024, we have been chairing the LGBTIQ technical working group under protection cluster in Ukraine together with UN agency, UN refugee agency, and technical working groups are the backbone of humanitarian system and humanitarian coordination in depth in the country. Each one focuses on a specific area, for example, gender in humanitarian action, mine action, child protection, age instability technical working group, mental health and psychosocial support technical working groups. And these working groups brings together all of UN agencies, international NGOs and other parties who involved in humanitarian response and to set standards, develop tools, and monitor how aid reaches people in need. And for the first time, our technical working group dedicated to LGBTIQ inclusion became a formal part in this global humanitarian setting. It means that the safety, visibility, and rights of our communities are now discussed and addressed within the same decision-making system that shapes how humanitarian aid is planned and delivered across Ukraine. This group includes not only Outright International and not only UNHCR International. This group includes more than 50 participants from international NGOs, UN agencies, local activists, and local organizations who are led by LGBTIQ or who working or focus with LGBTIQ communities. We are also co-leading other entities in humanitarian settings in discussing issues of sexual orientation, gender identity, and self-expression as a gender, age, and disability in various sectors of humanitarian response. This year, previous months, we went further south to Odessa and to host first ever Southern Ukraine Inclusion and Partnership Forum, where government officials, police, and LGBTIQ communities with other ethnic minorities and other minority groups joined us in building shared inclusion standard. This forum was most about intersectional approach and people-centered approach that prioritize that individuals' needs, values, preferences, often by empowering them to lead their own care and making decisions with them rather than of them. What even lead to creation inclusion coalition? As for me, Inclusion Coalition, it is a real platform for real collaboration between all of humanitarian actors, government institution, and minority-led organization. It brings together all of parties for discussion and understanding what is inclusive humanitarian action means in practice, how to make sure that no one is left out because of who they are, where they live, or what community they belong to. Together, we are developing shared standard of inclusion, promoting intersectional approach, and ensuring that national recovery and Ukrainian national recovery and humanitarian strategies reflect the diversity of Ukrainian society. It is not a round table of words. It is a mechanism for change. For more than 100 years, the humanitarian system evolved through lessons learned from failures, from tragedies that challenged how the world responds to human suffering. For example, after Rwanda, we learned about silent skills. After Bosnia, we learned sexual violence is not just part of the war. After Haiti, Syria, we learned recovery needs local voices. And as for me, after Ukraine, we must learn that inclusion is not optional. We are standing at the turning point, a humanitarian reset, which started next year. It's a chance to rebuild a system that really serves everyone it means to protect. We got to make sure that LGBTIQ voices are heard everywhere, and that our well-being stays at the heart of peace and recovery efforts. Peace cannot be made behind closed doors. If we are not at the table where aid, peace, and reconstruction are decided, that peace will always be incomplete, as for me. We are not some separate group. As LGBTIQ, we are part of a displaced population, volunteers saving others, and leaders who rebuild our own communities. For me, peace ain't just the absence of war. It is visibility, safety, and freedom. It is when every person can rebuild their life with dignity. And let me be vulnerable again with intersectional lens. I'm not only Ukrainian citizenship and have ID, Ukrainian ID. I'm also gay man based in Ukraine, also twice IDP and part of ethnic minority group. And am I afraid? Yes, constantly. Am I scared? Yes, every day. But each morning, I tell myself, my dear boy, stand up. We're gonna make this world better place for everyone. And today we are here, and that is proof. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Vitaly. That was incredibly powerful to hear, and it is remarkable for us to understand that even in places like Ukraine that has been suffering a full-scale Russian invasion for 3 years, that positive things are emerging, and you are building that. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you to the UN system and others who are supporting that work there, the NGO community that has taken this on board, and we hope the work doesn't move backwards. Now for more inspiration, we're going to turn to a panel that focuses on other advocacy successes in 2025. I told you we were going to play you like a boomerang today, and we're going to continue with that. So we're going to hear some really encouraging voices about change that we have been able to make. So I would like to invite the panelists to please take this stage. As they come up, I am pleased to introduce our moderator for this session. Please come on up, Maria Paula. Our moderator is Maria Paula Perdomo. Maria Paula is the program manager for UN engagement at Outright. She supports Outright's advocacy at the UN to place the human rights of LGBTIQ people at the forefront and center of the UN's work. And she previously worked on the Chilean mission to the United Nations. So if I could please invite up, let's see, Venus, Kenita, Dori, and Fafali. Please come up to the stage. Thank you so much. So excited to hear from you all. And I will turn over to Maria Paula.
Hello. Yes, everyone can hear me? Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm MP. I'm very excited to be your moderator today. So we will be talking about moving the needle, and what that means is basically, is it okay now? Yes. It's going to be about how we are seeing some positive examples of change happening all around the world. We just heard those moving words from Vitaly about how activists in Ukraine are working in really challenging environments and still making great progress in humanitarian inclusion. And so the purpose of this panel really is to keep telling you those stories and keep showing you how we're making change. That's why I have this amazing panel here with me today. I will not go over their bios, but I just want to flag to you, there is this program that you should have in the front table. There's this teeny tiny code. If you scan it, you should have the full bios of the panelists, so just look at that. But I'm gonna go very briefly to introduce our panel. So we have Fafali Akwartsu from the Intersex Person Society of Ghana, who is gonna share insights on intersex visibility in Ghana and internationally. We have Dorothea Redeye from the Libraries Lesbian Association talking about Budapest Pride. We're going to have Dinos Avis, our colleague here from Outright, talking about trans legal victories in Asia. Last but not least, we have Kenita Placide from ECADE talking about the St. Lucia case. I just want to stress to our dear panelists, we are a little bit short on time, and I have the burden and responsibility to keep us on track. So what I will do is I will set a 4 minutes timer in my clock. I know you get really excited sharing your story. So whenever you just hear this sound, just know, please wrap up. It's time to let the next one speak and have their space. So I will jump straight to the panel now. And our first panelist is Dorothea. So this year, Viktor Orban had unsuccessfully tried to ban Budapest Pride. Can you share what happened and why was this such an important success for the movement?
Thank you. Works? Yes. Okay. Yes, so this March, the government implemented a law that says that demonstrations that would harm children or children's healthy development, that's the term, should be banned, and that children's rights overrides even some of the most fundamental rights if necessary. And here the most fundamental right obviously is the freedom of assembly. And of course, yeah, this is what happened. And of course, you know, as human rights defenders, we decided to challenge that, and we got very unified, all the LGBTQ organizations in you know, in making this Pride happen. And so a lot of people were worried, you know, of potential police violence, far-right violence, governmental repercussions. And we got a lot of questions like, okay, what will happen if? And we said, no, don't worry. We are going to have the Pride. So that was the major message from day one. And and it worked. As you could see, well, estimation, there are a lot of different estimations, but we can say that over 300,000 people marched in Budapest that day, and this was the biggest ever public demonstration in Hungary. And I think that the reason why so many people came was our consistent message was that this is more than just affecting the LGBTQ community. This is about everybody's fundamental right. You can never know, maybe next day your fundamental rights will be taken away. So this is a way to express protest against harming fundamental rights of everyone. And I think that people understood that. People are also fed up with the government. A lot of people, especially in Budapest, but a lot of people came from the countryside, and a lot of people came from, a lot of international people came. There were over 70 members of the European Parliament who attended. And that was important. So the organizers of the Pride tried to get European Parliament members to come, because that would increase the security of the march, because these are diplomatic people who have to be specially protected. And they did come in large numbers. So Budapest Pride's key message was that we are here, this is our home. We in Labris, we find it very important to keep saying on every possible forum that these are not just random acts of, you know, the government wakes up one morning and implements such a law, but with autocratic system infringing the rights of LGBT people, women, and reducing children's rights is like a core pillar of these regimes. And this is not the first act of the first anti-LGBT act of our government. This has been a process. It's been going on ever since they were elected first in 2010. And in the past years, there were various legal and propaganda actions against the community. So this is a process, and people have to, stop it and practice real acts of solidarity towards the LGBTQ community, and this is what happened. So yeah, it was important. Just maybe one or two more thoughts.
Maybe just one thought.
Yeah,
Spirit of
okay.
song. Thank you.
It was important for the organizers to plan the event strategically, so they invited a lot of, so not only LGBTQ speakers, but also allies, celebrities, influencers were on the stage, international guests, so there was really a broad access to people. So people who went on the stage could talk to a really broad audience, and that's really important to address everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothea. That's a great example of organizing, narrative shifting, and most importantly, how to bring others along with you while you stand to very tangible threats from the opposition. So while we think about movements, I would now like to move to the intersex movement. And so, Fafali, I want to ask you, this year the global intersex movement made great strides forward. Can you tell us a little bit about the positive developments in Ghana, in Africa, and internationally?
Thank you very much. So in Ghana, intersex issues have always been seen as a taboo or a curse, but there has been ground-breaking visibility and also movement building, where we have been able to use mainstream media like the daily newspapers, national television and radio stations to do our intersex awareness creation, where we have also been able to contact religious and traditional leaders who are now allies of our community and are also helping with our advocacy. And also currently there has been another introduction with a new government of the anti-LGBTI bill, but intersex has been removed from that bill currently due to advocacy work that has gone on from 2021. Also at the Africa level or the Africa continent, previously we used to be a fragmented voices, but currently there is more cohesion with the formation of the Africa Intersex movement. And also we have been able to coordinate and in partnership with UNDP, We Belong Africa. Last month, we came out with a policy guideline that we are using at the Africa level. And also the Africa Commission for People and Human Rights also developed the resolution 552, which we are using at the regional level to advocate for the promotion and protection of the rights of intersex persons across Africa. And then internationally, somewhere earlier this year, the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights also opened up the first ever call for reports for intersex violations. And through that report, during the 60th Human Rights Council session, their report was launched, and also the first ever intersex panel, which was done by intersex activists and member states, and also some allies. And these are some of the gains we are making across, and we are using this in our advocacy work and making a lot of progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fafali, for sharing that great growth and visibility that the intersex movement has had in Africa, but also internationally. And in keeping things at the regional level, I will now like to shift to Asia, where even though we just heard in the prior panel how trans rights are under attack, we also know that progress is happening incrementally in other parts of the world. So now I will turn to Venus. So could you tell what progress have you documented in Asia?
Yeah, I think indeed, as my colleagues Ricky and Alberto has shown, trans rights have been under attack, especially this year. But for the Rights and Retrograde series of Outright, we also documented several wins in Asia. Next slide, please. Where 3 countries had like very significant court wins. And nowhere is this more true than in India, where courts are leading the way for trans equality. Next slide, please. And there's a lot that happened in India in 2025, where there is a tradition of judicial activism. But first, in May, the Supreme Court of India ordered the government to reconsider a 2017 policy that excluded trans women from donating blood and instead called on them to consult experts. Now, this is a very fresh take, showing that common sense policy is still possible in an age of gender paranoia. And a month later, India celebrated Pride with not just one, but 3 court wins on legal gender recognition. On June 2, for example, the High Court of Kerala upheld trans people's right to a family when they recognized that a trans woman and a trans man should be recorded simply as parents on the birth certificate of their child, which previously misgendered them. On June 16, the High Court of Andhra Pradesh affirmed that trans women are women. 2 months earlier, the UK Supreme Court excluded trans women from critical protections. And then in June, the former colony of the UK affirmed that trans women are entitled to protections from domestic violence for women. And finally, on June 18, in another landmark decision, the High Court of Calcutta ruled that the transgender ID can be used to apply for a passport, which is a critical step towards one of the promises of the Transgender Persons Act of 2019. In the same year, Indian courts also urged the government to proactively address inequalities through affirmative action. So on October 6, 2025, the Delhi High Court questioned the Delhi government on the delay of the implementation of the trans quota in public service. And 3 days later, another high court, the Kerala High Court, urged the Bar Council to reserve places for trans people in law colleges, which is already being done in medical and engineering schools. So these rulings came a decade after the landmark decision in 2014 by the Supreme Court that affirmed trans people's right to equality. They also came 5 years after the historic Trans Persons Act of 2019. Now let's go to East Asia, where courts in Japan and Hong Kong also protected trans rights. Next slide, please. So in September, in Japan, a court in the city of Sapporo ruled in favor of self-determination when it said that it is unconstitutional to require trans people to undergo surgery or take hormones to alter the appearance of their genitals. So this decision really builds national momentum for legal gender recognition 2 years after the Supreme Court struck down the requirement of sterilization. And also in Japan, by March 2025, 5 courts had already ruled that the country's failure to recognize same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, paving the way toward marriage equality. And last but not the least, next slide, please. In Hong Kong, a court also delivered another win for trans people's rights when it said that a regulation that barred trans people from using public toilets that align with their gender identity is unconstitutional. However, the provision remains in force as the court had given the government a year to implement the ruling. But this also builds on another landmark decision 2 years ago when the Court of Final Appeal struck down the requirement for trans people to undergo gender-affirming surgery to change their legal gender markers. So in Asia, really, 2025 was a year of the judiciary. And as a trans woman from the Philippines, although my country was not involved, it's very refreshing to see courts hold the line. But one thing is clear from all of these court decisions, they built on legal precedents. So they did not happen in a vacuum, but they strove to implement existing laws, existing landmark decisions, and really demonstrating that our struggle, as our colleagues have said earlier, is an ongoing struggle, not only to win our rights, but to preserve them. And it also reminds us that strategic litigation remains a critical tool for activists that we should consider or start considering in our advocacy. I'll end there. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you so much, Venus, for sharing this landmark court decisions in Asia. And also just wanted to know, not only in Asia are we seeing this role of courts in helping drive progress. We also have seen that in the Caribbean, and more specifically in St. Lucia, where we just saw an amazing decriminalization victory just in July. So I'm gonna turn now to Kenita. Can you tell us what happened in St. Lucia and what made your work successful, and what does this mean for the movement going forward?
I mean, at this point, thank you very much and good day, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think as we look at the decision from Sinusha, we actually have to look at the foundation of strategic litigation, which didn't start with Sinusha. They started with conversations that started in 2015. Those countries or organizations in countries deciding to agree to even go that route. And I think it took a number of different stakeholders to get to this point that we are enjoying finally seeing some of our work come to fruition. Because we look at this consultation in 2015 that happened in the island of Grenada, engaging all the countries that we thought, all the small islands. It was funders, it was lawyers, it was activists coming to the table, having those conversations together, but also separately as to what was required to get us there. And when we look at organizations like Outright, ARCUS, Wellsprings, OSF, to the very foundational move of decrim and thinking about what was required, I think we can definitely say that those organizations listened to what we needed to make it happen. And through them listening, they supported us where we needed it. And so strategic litigation was something we went in with from the very start. For the Caribbean, it was important to ground this in local actors, including local lawyers. So although we had support from international NGOs, Human Dignity Trusts with pro bono lawyers, the Canadian HIV/AIDS Legal Network, Outright always looking to give support with amplifying some of the projects and voices of the region. When it came down to the court cases, we put forward activists on the ground. We put forward lawyers on the ground just to eliminate the whole issue of foreign influence and why we are here. And so it took some strategy, thinking about not just the legal cases, but thinking about the communication process that we wanted, positive or negative, thinking about the security of the claimants, of the organizations, of the work that we're doing. And we, in this case, we highlight Synergia for being there for the work plans and security overview continuously through it. I think one of the things that was also very helpful, OSF did something in the beginning with ARCUS that looked at global decrim, which allowed us to learn from other cases. The other cases that went forward, like cases in Kenya, in Botswana, in India, learning from some of those, but even the very case in the Caribbean that's looking at Belize and Trinidad and Tobago, which happened before. And some of the lessons learned from that was critical in how we develop our cases. So when you heard about Sinusha, most of you would have only heard when the decision was out. And we have to say, before we celebrated Sinusha this year, we celebrated Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Barbados in 2022. We also had the opportunity to support the organizations in cases in St. Vincent and Dominica, even if those cases were not ours. But we also saw the victory of the decriminalization in the Commonwealth of Dominica in 2024. So this is just saying that it has been a building. Right now we have 5 islands in the Caribbean that has gone through the judicial system, winning their cases out of 7. Out of those 7, we have only lost 1, and 1 currently in process. So, I mean, it is the strategy not just of the legal arguments, which was pretty much I think it was a region committed because the lawyers argued every point on which, this could have been overturned. I think it would have been a beautiful thing for all of you to see lawyers sitting in a room and being devil's advocate to each other. You just have to sit down and watch. Don't get involved. But on the other end, also had the opportunity to listen to the activists and what their main concerns were. Even when we ran security processes, it was looking at what was the worst case scenario we had to prepare for. And that's what we prepared for, even if we were pushing everything towards a positive result. So I think when we look at the work on the ground, the activists and all the actors, especially the lawyers, the funders who helped make this happen, it was certainly not in a vacuum, but pulling people along.
Thank you so much, Kenita. And what a valuable insight you've given us in terms of strategic litigation and what the work in the ground looks like. And I want to thank you for your work, and I want to thank all the panelists for the work. And now we will move into the question and answer segment, which I'm really excited to hear of our online participants and also in our in-person participants. Sadly, we're time constrained, as I have personally let you know a lot of times. I apologize for that. So what we will do is we will take one question from the room in person and one question from our online participants, if there is any. So I would like to call on our colleague Kimberly to see if we have questions from our online participants. No questions. Okay, so we will take then 2 questions from the room. The microphones are located to my left and my right. So you can just approach the microphones and ask your questions to the panelists. Kenita saying it's a perfect presentation.
I
No
have
question.
a question.
Oh, there we go. Hi.
Hey,
Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
my name is Gui Moalem. I'm the executive director of Vote LGBT, an organization in Brazil that fights for queer representation. We've had 2 great strategic litigation successes. One in 2018, where we managed to include chosen name in voters ID, which allowed trans people to also run for office without exposing their dead names, as well as voters voting with their real name. And since then, 40,000 trans citizens has changed their voter ID with their chosen name. And last year, we managed to provoke the electoral court to include gender identity and sexuality and sexual orientation in the official application for running for office. So we came from, when we started 11 years ago, we could count on one hand the number of people who dared to run out as a queer candidate. It was a political suicide. And last year, we found out that we had over 3,000 candidates that were out and proud and wanted to share their, queer identity. Out of them, over 600 were trans, so it's great. But the thing is, as we're bracing for the next election, 2026, there's a risk that the far right can take out the government in Brazil. So what happens to this data that we fought so much to include, and for the state to have about ourselves, if it gets into the hands and for all the trans persecution that we're seeing right now in the world. So we're already moving, but I would like to know if anybody had that problem before and how did you deal with that? Because it would help a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will take our last question over here. Ricky, you have the floor.
Yes, and I just have one question for Kenita. So we've seen the progress that you've made with decriminalization. Can you speak to what progress is or might be happening in terms of trans rights vis-a-vis legal gender recognition in the Caribbean? Is that something that's been worked on? What progress has been made, or are there any roadblocks in the way that are stopping it from happening?
Thank you. So luckily, a lot of questions have to do with you, Kenita, which is really good because we will get to hear from our amazing panelists again today. So Kenita, I may direct these questions to you. And of course, if anyone else has anything to chime in, feel free to jump. But Kenita, over to you.
Elections is always a ticklish point. And I think that when we look at, there is one thing that we have learned in terms of diplomacy. And even as activists, we have to be diplomats at times. It's how do you lobby? How do you pretty much become friends with the current government, but also create relationships with those who are coming in or potential government, especially when you realize there's a change of environment and things may change. So it's always important, unfortunately, not best of words, but play all sides of the game, because you do not know where tides are changing, and creating that kind of inroads would be important to kind of to keep what you have established without falling out. I think when we look at the gains that we have done in the Caribbean, it's not with just one set of people. As we look at the cases that have won, you're still, even within our say for our labor laws, we have seen where sexual orientation have been included. Now the fight is the education around getting gender identity included. One of the things to the Caribbean is that we can actually look at the last 11 years to see where trans visibility really became something that we can say, yes, in the Caribbean, we have trans people. Our experience has been majority of persons would leave country to the global north before they actually transition or identified, because the cultural attitudes did not allow before. But now that there's visibility, we are trying to work alongside trans people to get them to a point where the same work we did on sexual orientation has to be done on gender identity. One does not equate to the next. However, St. Lucia is one of those countries, actually under the alliance program with Outright. We saw one of our organizations, Raise Your Voice St. Lucia, with funding from the UK. So it's a kind of a whole complex aspect, but we were able to get sexual orientation and gender identity into the Domestic Violence Act that passed 2 years ago. So we are seeing some progress. However, what we need now is how do we get it across other islands? And as long as the groups are actually raising, we will see that. My last point, and I know it will be my last point, you don't need to come back to me, is this. As much as we are changing laws through strategic litigation, part of strategic litigation, and when we speak about communications, should also be that of campaigns. If you have not given money for campaigns before, do it now. Because changing the law is only going to stay for a minute if we are not changing the hearts and minds on the ground that allow the politicians to see that there is appetite for the changes that are being made legally. Because if that cultural and social change does not happen, what you have is a group of people that's doing exactly what we are facing now. The rollback, because there are people pushing that movement. We need to change the hearts and minds, tell our stories, not just online, but in person, where it actually creates that kind of, I hear you, I see you, I feel you more so. It's not a place we are looking for tolerance, but we need to get to that point of acceptance.
Thank you so much, Kenita. That's a really valuable takeaway. Change the law, the hearts, and the minds, in able to achieve this progress. So I think we've achieved the end of this panel. And I know I was supposed to be here moderating the panel that's showing you positive change all around the world, but I want to take a second and end in a note of gratitude, because we're talking here about progress, but with progress comes exhaustion, comes trying and trying over again, comes despair. You know, progress is not linear, so it also takes resilience and showing up every day. The work is hard, but it does pay off. So can we please thank our panel here with a round of applause, and everyone else doing this work?
Thank you so much, MP. Thank you to our amazing panelists. And as MP noted, you'll be hearing again from Dori, Venus, and Fali over the course of the day. So this is not your last chance to see them on stage. It's almost like Kenita was cued to mention the money, because to do all this work and to sustain all of these incredible successes, our movements do need funding. And so we're about to talk about two things that are related to money. In a moment, we're going to move into a panel on economic inclusion for lesbian, bisexual, and queer women, specifically LBQ women. It's an acronym we throw out there a lot. So if you hear LBQ, we're talking about lesbian, bisexual, and queer women and the specific need to invest in those communities. But before we get to that panel, we want to invite one of our key allies and